What's happening, my fellow culinary enthusiasts? I'm Josh with Emerald Coast Chefs, and today we are going to be taking a trip for some inspiration across the Mississippi Delta and making one of the Gulf Coast region's most classic, iconic dishes. You know, if there's anything that we here in the South love, it is good bread. You see that served with almost every meal. You know, if there's anything we love here in the South, it is good desserts. I mean, no meal is complete without a good dessert. 4, 5, 6, 7 of them if you go to like those old church potlucks, you know what I'm talking about? Man, if there is anything we love here in the South, it is some good whiskey. Stick around, let's put all those things together. You don't want to miss it, because I'm going to show you how to turn this into this. Now, everybody with a bread pudding recipe has an opinion on what type of bread to use in your bread pudding. Some people like to use day-old donuts. Some people like to use more of a brioche bread. Some people more of a white bread. The only thing I will say is I would not use anything that is super, super heavy and dense, and I would not use anything that is overly aerated. So normally I use a butter crust bread, but today we're going to be using a French baguette because that's what I have on hand and this will work just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and start by cutting this into approximately 1/2 to 3/4 inch size cubes. So once our bread's cut, we're going to go ahead and start by cracking 5 eggs into our bowl. So I'm going to go ahead and beat these eggs, and we just want to make sure that these get beaten really, really well. We want them not only fully incorporated, the whites and the yolks together, but also want to go ahead and whip a good amount of air into here. That's what's going to give it some lift. When we pop these into the oven, we want the eggs to help with the rise, not keep it dense and flat. All right. And then I'm going to add just a pinch of salt. And a pretty good amount of sugar, roughly 2 cups. Then I'm going to make sure and incorporate this sugar really well into these eggs. You'll know that you're at the right place when you start to see the color of the eggs change and you start to get that much more pale yellow color. All right, and then I'm going to add good quality vanilla extract, some grated nutmeg, and some cinnamon. For reference, I probably go about 3 times as heavy on the cinnamon as the nutmeg. The nutmeg is quite a bit stronger, so it's probably somewhere around about a tablespoon of cinnamon in there and about a teaspoon of nutmeg. And then once these are blended in, I'm going to go ahead and add 1/2 and 1/2. All right, now our custard's ready. All All right, so we have our custard all put together, and as you can see here, it still has a lot of air bubbles and it's very light and foamy. So we're going to go ahead and add this to our bread now at this point. One thing I did want to go ahead and mention is I'm not going to add any other ingredients. Typically for the dinner parties we do with our company, we don't. And the reason for that is I acknowledge there's a certain segment of the population that even if it's fabulous and perfectly executed, for whatever reason, may not like bread pudding. Then when you maybe pair that with people who don't like apples or people who don't like things like raisins that are very common, then it creates a lot more challenges. So there's plenty of flavor going on here with that light and fluffy texture, the sauce, the ice cream, and everything that we're going to have. But if you want to add apples, if you want to add raisins, if you want to add pecans, walnuts, any of that, by all means, feel free. It's your bread pudding. So I just wanted to make sure and let you know that you do have some options on other ingredients you can add. So I'm just going to go ahead. I know that looks like a lot of custard for the amount of bread that we had, but that bread's going to soak up a lot of this, and we want to have a little excess hanging around anyway. All right, and I'm just going to put on a pair of gloves. You can do this with a spoon. The main thing that we just want to achieve here is not getting rid of all of the air that's in our custard. So we want to leave as much of that air as possible. And then we want to not squish this into the bread. So something I see a lot of young cooks do in the restaurant industry, thinking it's really going to kind of push the flavor of that custard in there, as people have a tendency to want to squeeze these little cubes of bread together. And you don't want to do that. All that custard in between them is what makes this dish so great. So after this is tossed, it's going to vary a little bit depending on the type of bread that you use, but I would say put this in the refrigerator somewhere around 1 hour or so before baking it. I see recipes that say overnight, 4 hours, 6 hours. I think it's going to do everything that you need it to do in 1 hour, or I would argue that maybe you just cut your bread too large. All right, so our mixture has come together in the refrigerator now, had time for the bread to absorb all of that custard and all of our vanilla and the flavors from our spices. So I've got a muffin tin here, and it's been sprayed with a floured nonstick spray. Speaking of which, feel free to use a spray without flour and a gluten-free bread. I've made many gluten-free bread puddings, and that works just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and spoon this bread mixture into our muffin cups. And as I'm spooning this in, you just want it to sit kind of with its own weight in each one of the cups. We don't want to mash this down to fit extra in there or anything like that. We can keep adding a little bit to it as we go. You can also do, obviously, the same recipe in just like, a 9x13 casserole dish. But I just really enjoy using the muffin tins because things bake a little faster and it's more even across the board, the way that you can rotate the muffin tins in the oven as opposed to rectangular casserole pans. Sometimes it's hard to get the center the same level of cooked as, maybe the exteriors, especially depending on the oven that you're using. So these muffin tins come in handy, and then of course they're already portioned whenever they're done baking. All right, and once I've gotten all of my bread kind of spooned in here and taken up most of the space, I like to just go back and spoon in any of the liquid custard that I can fill the cups back up with. All right, and then once we have that all put together and our liquid in, we're going to go ahead and go straight into a convection oven. I've got this little oven set at 360 degrees convection bake, and these will probably take roughly somewhere around 17 to 20 minutes. So no bread pudding would be complete without a sauce. Hear that? Last restaurant I ate at that served me bread pudding without a sauce. So we want to make sure that we have a great sauce to go with this. So we're going to make a bourbon brown sugar sauce. I call this a bourbon brown sugar sauce because it's not actually a true caramel sauce that we're going to be making today, since we're just going to be using the brown sugar. You can go ahead and make a caramel sauce using granulated sugar and go through the caramelization process. I actually like that product slightly better, but the truth is that caramelizing sugar can be very dangerous. And so I'm obviously working in environments a lot where people are in and out on vacation. They're staying obviously in large houses that they're not familiar with. And there's just so many people in and out that I try to not have boiling sugar in the kitchen whenever avoidable. So I'm going to show you the method that I most commonly make this sauce by. So we're going to start out with usually what I add to make the sauce. I would say somewhere around probably a cup and a half, maybe even a cup and 3/4 of bourbon. You don't have to use your best single barrel stuff, but don't use that rot gut stuff that you got sick on in high school. That's not going to give you the flavor that you're looking for there either. And then we're going to turn this on. And as soon as we start to see some of this alcohol simmer up, we'll go ahead and catch this guy on fire and burn the alcohol off. All right, so usually I like to give this, depending on how hot you have the burner, probably 30, 40 seconds, something like that. You just want to let your pan heat up a little bit. When you start to see any of the bourbon around the sides and typically smell the alcohol vapors coming up into the air, you know it's ready. So just stand back, go ahead, give it a light, and it's going to reduce by roughly 2/3. Okay, so our alcohol is rendered off, so I'm going to go ahead and add in our butter. This is 1/2 pound or 2 sticks if you're using quarters. Make sure you're using a good quality butter on that. That matters. And then we'll let that melt down and incorporate in. All right, and our butter has melted and incorporated in about 2/3 of the way. I like to let the butter, especially if it's cold and I just took it out of the fridge, I like to let it get a pretty good start and get most of the way melted before I add in the cream, just because if we over simmer cream too much, it can separate, and there are still liquids from the bourbon simmering as well as some milk solids from the butter. Okay, so I'll go ahead and add our cream. That's not a lot of cream here. I'd say a little less than 1/2 cup. And what we're wanting to do there is just kind of create a little bit, help the butter out and add a little bit of creaminess to the texture there, as well as the cream will help with the stability to help ensure our sauce doesn't separate. All right, and that looks all incorporated in together. So I'm going to go ahead and add our brown sugar. That's just about 3/4 or so of a 1 pound bag. I wish you guys could smell this. It smells so amazing. You get that deepness from the bourbon and the oakiness in there. All right, I think this is just about together. I pretty much like to just bring this up to a little bit of a simmer. It just helps ensure that we completely break down all of our granules of sugar and don't have any, kind of grainy texture going on in our sauce. So bring that up to a simmer. Once it comes up to a nice simmer, go ahead and shut that off. And it will stay hot for a pretty good while, probably ½ hour or so before that will need to be reheated. So in the meantime, I think our bread pudding is just about ready to come out of the oven. So let's check it out. So we've got these pulled out. They look great. They smell amazing. We just want to let them rest for just a little bit, kind of come back down. You saw how light and puffy these are. They just need to cool and contract a little bit so that we can get them out of this pan. In the meantime, I'm going to go grab some ice cream out of the freezer. Be right back. All right, so it looks like these have cooled enough that I should be able to get them right out of the pan like so. And then I'm just going to give this a little mint garnish and a little cinnamon stick inside the bowl here. And then again, anytime we're working with hot sugar, just be very careful. No hot sauce is a good sauce to get splashed on you, but this is a very bad one to get splashed on you. So I recommend that the technique you use is learning how to pour away from you with a ladle. It is the safest way and the way that gives you the most control. And lastly, what would bread pudding be without a scoop of good quality vanilla ice cream? There we have it. Bourbon bread pudding. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our time has come to an end today. Thank you so much for stopping by our YouTube channel. If you got anything out of this video, please let us know in the comments. If you have any questions, anything that interests you, certainly if you make this dish at home, please let us know. We're always happy to see that. Definitely subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, get the weekly notifications when we release videos. And as always, thanks so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Have a great day. That's what's up.